Families of the 5,000 sailors and Marines facing horrific conditions on an aircraft carrier that's deployed to the war in Iran confronted the acting Secretary of the Navy at a fiery town hall last week.
You guys, there's a mental health crisis happening aboard the USS Lincoln in the Middle East that no one is talking about. 6 people have tried to jump off that ship.
At one point, a woman actually said that she found it difficult to be proud of her husband's service because he had actually been questioning the mission after he had seen several news reports about innocent civilians being killed in Iran.
A disturbing report from the Military Times emerged today. It paints a very different image to that which Donald Trump likes to convey regarding this war. According to numerous sources, families of sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln are sounding the alarm that sailors are exhausted, struggling psychologically, and in multiple reported incidents have actually attempted to go overboard during an extraordinarily prolonged deployment.
First element up on the screen, sailors are trying to jump off the thing as it's been out in the ocean for more than 240 days at this point. Let's roll let's roll this first thought.
You guys, there's a mental health crisis happening aboard the USS Lincoln in the Middle East that no one is talking about, and mainly because the Navy's pretty much quashing it. You will read online about food shortages, supply shortages, poor morale among crew members. That's because they've been at sea continuously for 250 days. They've been deployed a total of 271 days, 250 without a port of call. That's unheard of. Normally they would go to port every 3 to 6 weeks. They have not been to port in 38 weeks. Keep in mind there are 52 weeks in a year. And yes, the showers are moldy. They're eating basically like a gruel kind of slop at this point. There's no deodorant. There is no toothpaste. My nephew has a friend on board there, and I was basically hearing updates last week when I was in the States in real time. They're not talking about the mental health crisis. 6 people have tried to jump off that ship. The most recent was last Monday. You know, when you have not touched land in 38 weeks, in over 200 days, things start to happen to you mentally. You know, combine that with exhaustion and deadly mistakes start to happen. So, you know, this is how the Department of War, this is how Donald Trump treats our servicemen and women whose lives are already being put in harm's way for a bullshit war of aggression that was supposed to be over in a matter of weeks. We are further putting their lives at risk out of sheer ineptitude and neglect. It defies logic, it defies reason, and it defies basic fucking humanity.
Military Times reports that the carrier's roughly 5,000 sailors and Marines have now been deployed for more than 8 months. They left home on November 21st of 2025. Their deployment was originally expected to end in May. And now, months later, with the president no closer to explaining what the end goal is regarding this conflict.
I don't talk about strategy. Why should I talk strategy? Maybe, but we have 3 powerful strategies. We could just keep it alone and they're going to fail. We could just keep, you know, doing sort of just like nice and easy, relax. Like I said, I'm sort of negotiating. You see there.
The Navy still have not publicly announced when they are coming home. And the Military Times, they are trying to shed light on the situation on board. They've spoke with several family members aboard the ship, and they were describing how sailors were exhausted, overextended, and burned out. Some family members have described grim situations in which shipmates attempted to go overboard.
We're going to begin tonight with growing concerns out of the Middle East, this time from the families of sailors and Marines on board San Diego-based USS Lincoln. The aircraft carrier has now been deployed for 9 months.
So MS Now spoke with a dozen family members of military members aboard that ship, reporting everything from toilets not working to supply shortages. NBC7's Omari Fleming explains how those concerns could lead to major safety issues.
Think about this: moldy showers, broken toilets, and food shortages. That's what families are reporting their loved ones are dealing with on board USS Abraham Lincoln. It's a lack of necessities they worry are creating some safety concerns.
Food obviously has been scarce. All he's really told me is there's a time where he was only eating half a cup of rice and 2 tortillas.
Families say their loved ones also dealing with long periods with no hot water for showering, laundry service that's down for weeks, and standing in line at the ship's store for more than an hour, only to find there aren't basic supplies like toothpaste, soap, and deodorant.
I know there's Army guys that are like, look, I slept in a hole that was muddy underneath the tank and I ate MREs. And it's like, right. But you didn't do that for 9 straight months.
The shortage is happening as the Lincoln just set a naval record for the most continuous days at sea, more than 200 and counting, and only 2 short port calls in the 9 months they've been deployed.
Trend continues. It's going to impact retention and it's going to impact operational safety.
As a result, more than 200 family members attended a meeting with the acting Navy Secretary last week. Families who were in attendance raised concerns about mental health, exhaustion, safety, and the Vice Admiral Joseph Cahill acknowledged the impact of the prolonged deployment on sailors and their families, and essentially discussed how the Navy is attempting to provide counselors, chaplains, medical support, and other resources aboard the ship. Now, what's interesting about this story is it sheds light on part of the war that Trump and his cronies will not discuss because it doesn't fit into a Truth Social post alleging complete and total victory. But it is another consequence of this conflict, the human toll as service members are left in the dark while the president continues to flip-flop on the daily.
Well, Peter, I know Donald Trump watches your show, and so I will say to him directly, Mr. Trump, you are the first president in American history to start and lose a war by yourself. You have made America more weak, more alone, and less respected. Congress has to take back the steering wheel from this impaired driver before we end up in a third quagmire in the Middle East of the 21st century. That starts with ending the escalation. He keeps on trying to escalate vertically, meaning more effects on target. Iran escalates horizontally, bringing in other regional players, other infrastructure assets into the fight. Iran is winning that escalation ratchet. We got to stop it. We got to negotiate transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Then we have to strengthen the Abraham Accords. But that is going to be a decadal process. It's not going to happen in this guy's term because he's too incompetent.
As of yesterday, Reuters reported that there has been, quote, absolutely no progress in efforts to revive the interim agreement between the United States and Iran. Trump continues to threaten Tehran while also claiming that the United States has, quote, total control over the strait. But Iran says that the waterway will remain blocked until its conditions are met. So while thousands of American sailors remain stuck at sea, the diplomatic situation, which directly involves how their situation pans out, seems further from being resolved than ever.
Hegseth clashed with President Trump over the munitions shortage that threatens the U.S. military operation in Iran. According to the Post, Trump vented at Hegseth, saying he thought the munitions issue had been fixed. They cite 2 people familiar with the exchange. Hegseth reportedly blamed his deputy at the Pentagon. The Post reports the exchange underscored Trump's increasing frustration with his defense secretary, who was one of the biggest early advocates for taking military action against Iran, convincing Trump it would be a quick and relatively easy win, according to multiple officials.
And keep in mind, this is the war Donald Trump promised would demonstrate decisive American power and would be over quickly. Meanwhile, now we're 6 months into the war, and you have the Wall Street Journal reporting on how Trump is so desperate to find a way out while still trying to claim victory that he's willing to forgo a nuclear agreement. The whole reason that he escalated this war in the first place, allegedly.
Once again, Donald Trump is testing out a new strategy with Iran, with this war now grinding into a 6th month. Over the weekend, he told Axios he's now low-keying it, whatever that means, hoping that the mounting economic pressure on Tehran will be more effective than the on-again, off-again strikes that we've seen over these last several weeks. Of course, the main pressure point is the Strait of Hormuz here, and Iran has its own strategy of economic pressure, pushing a new set of conditions to reopen the strait. They're demanding billions of dollars, the removal of American troops from the region, and an end to the naval blockade. This comes as the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump had thought that the reopening of the strait was imminent. U.S. officials say he was prepared to declare victory and even floated the idea of walking away without a nuclear deal.
Loved ones of those on board have specifically described how the uncertainty itself is corrosive. Now, the Navy have said they are preparing the USS Theodore Roosevelt carrier strike group to eventually relieve the Lincoln, but officials have not publicly provided a timeline citing operational security. And that's what makes this military times story such a brutal counterpoint to what we are hearing coming from this administration. Trump and Hegseth love to present war itself as spectacle, but this paints a very vivid picture of the toll on the ground, and it should alarm every American, right?
Multiple USS Abraham Lincoln sailors have tried to go overboard amid extended deployment, families say. So this is extraordinarily serious. This is, you go back, you read novels or about like 19th century seafaring. Okay, they had it worse than these guys had.
Yeah.
This is not good.
No.
I mean,
38 weeks.
They're getting resupplied, from shore as quickly as possible from little, shuttle boats going back and forth. But this is getting dark.
These are Americans doing what their government have asked them to do. And reports suggest there's deep dissatisfaction on board. Not to mention, at home, more and more Americans are voicing their concern and are vehemently rejecting this war across the board. Reuters Ipsos reported last week that only 35% of Americans supported the war. Half expected the conflict to produce more chaos in the Middle East over the following year. Only 17% expected it to make the region more stable. It's quite an extraordinary rejection of Trump's fundamental argument. And his problem is that Americans increasingly believe his war produces the exact opposite. More instability, more cost, more danger, and no end.
A new poll out this morning shows about 2/3 of the American people say the war has not been worthwhile, and that includes nearly 4 in 10 Republicans.
69% of Americans disapprove of the handling of this conflict. The clock is ticking for President Trump to get out of this war before voters head to the polls. It's making a lot of Republicans nervous. It's already, as we know, unpopular.
The truth is there's not much good news for Republicans. Underwater on the economy, as you showed, underwater on affordability. Those two issues are front and center for sure. Everywhere you look, Republicans are down. He promised to keep us out of endless wars or unsatisfactory wars. And now he's in one, and it's not at all clear how it's going to end. So he's vulnerable on this point. And I was in political terms, he does need to get this over with. But what he may need is time, and he doesn't have a lot of time.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.